No, there is not.
Alright. Good?
Let's fucking roll.
Let's do this.
Could maybe make this a weekly thing. I guess we're going to find out.
I guess we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Welcome to episode 15 of the Twin Towers podcast. This is a very special, very exclusive Burning Bridges reunion episode. I'm here with one of the Du Boys, one of my running mates from back in the day when the podcast first started. None other than the youth basketball legend. Everybody knows him. It's Eamon. It's E. Randall. What's good, my brother?
You know, I feel like you could have not added the term youth. I think basketball legend might have made me feel a little bit better, but
Either way. So, dude, it's been, we're talking probably 7 years since we've sat down together with the mics. I mean, we go way back. We got many episodes on the archive. We've done this a lot, but it's been a long time.
It has been a long time, and you know what? That's kind of good. Like you said, it's a reunion, but things aren't stale. We're going to have a lot of shit to talk about. I'm sure all your millions of fans have been wondering what I'm doing, and tonight they're going to find out.
They're going to be excited to see you for sure. I did a solo last week just to let the fans know what's going on. And I'll just, real quick, before we even get into anything, and by the way, you want to talk into this side of the mic.
Just Is this the right side?
You're good. You got it now.
All right, cool.
Sounds great. Sounds amazing. As far as Mike's concerned, I don't have an update. All right, I appreciate all the comments. I appreciate all the concern. You guys really, showed out. Appreciate that. I don't know if he saw it. I don't know if he didn't. He is completely MIA, and I'm not talking about the hair artist, the local renowned hair artist. I'm talking about missing in action. I've not been able to get a hold of him. So I got nothing on that. That's why we brought in the big dogs. That's why we brought in Eamon.
Well, other than that, it's probably going good, though.
Everything's going great, I think. I really don't know. But this is the perfect guy because not only do we have the chemistry built in from years and years of Burning Bridges talk, but I think in 5 years of group chatting, we probably agreed on one single thing, which was the Texas burnt orange uniform is a unique color. Other than that, we pretty much butt heads on every single topic.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it's organically or it's just our personalities where we just have to stick to something and just get stronger in that position when there's opposition on it.
That's part of it.
But like many of you, I'm sure you guys have group chats. I'm going to confidently say that pretty much every friend group does. And myself and Cody happen to differ on a lot of things, but I think that's what makes it compelling. If we agreed on every single thing, it'd be kind of boring. Right.
Well, I don't know if we need to disagree on every single thing, but we do. So that's just the way it rolls. I appreciate you jumping in, filling in, and I'm hoping this might turn into something where we can rely on you a little bit. I know you got a busy schedule. I got to stop fucking recruiting you guys with kids. I don't know why I go down that road exactly.
Well, here's the thing. I had kids pretty young, so my kids are a little bit older, a little more dependent. A couple years, we could do this every fucking day. They'll be out of the house, and there'll be no more bridges left to burn by that point.
Shit, we might be at episode 22 by next week at that rate. We'll see what happens. Beautiful kids. Love your daughters. Great kids. Like I said, I appreciate you coming here to do this because you're helping me out quite a bit. And although you didn't do the fantasy league, this makes up for it a little bit in my book. So what's your take on fantasy? Because you had a strong stance on that, why you didn't want to do it. This is my first time doing it in about 5-6 years, and you just were not feeling...
strong might be a little bit of an overstatement. So this is where it goes back to fantasy. Once I started actually gambling on sports, Mom, I don't actually gamble with money. It's just for fun with friends.
Of course.
I realized that it kind of diluted actually playing fantasy football. And what really turned me off about fantasy football is I used to be the commissioner of our league.
Well, actually, if we actually
you were the original one.
Correct.
But
you took over and tried to usurp me as the commissioner, but that didn't last.
So what I realized is we had a group of maybe 10 or 12. I'm not sure the exact number, but I can tell you it was even for sure. Mm-hmm. And you'd have our diehards, guys like you, guys like Tyler, guys like Cole, guys like Angelo. And we had some others who, they were casual football fans, but didn't necessarily follow the sport religiously. And what I'd realize is some of those guys, and I won't say their names because I certainly want to put that shame on them. They would just read a magazine an hour before the draft, and then they'd end up winning the league sometimes. And my point is there's no skill here. It's just dumb luck.
It's luck. Yeah, it's all luck for the most part. Injuries play a big role and shit like that.
And this is going to make me sound like a contrarian, but I think it just kind of reinforces my point. Is I hear just my aunt or just random coworkers don't like really into fantasy football. It's just so commercialized. I feel like when we were younger, it was more niche. It was just really for the diehards and the diehards friends. But now it's just every random person, and they think they're a football expert because they know fantasy football. And the reality is, being a good football player and being a good fantasy football player, while there's some overlap, they're not the exact same thing.
Very true. And I was sad to hear that I couldn't convince you to be in the league, because it's something that I think is going to run for a long time to come, I hope. And maybe someday you might change your mind on that, because I wanted to get some of the originals from the Du Bois League, bring them into the fold. But all the points you said, I certainly agree with, which, hey, we're starting on the right foot here. Usually
hold on. One other thing I forgot to add, and I'm sure you'll shit on this point, and I'll clean it up with the toilet paper right now.
Possibly.
Is I didn't like rooting for guys who were playing against my favorite team. So I'm a Titans fan. If I have CJ Stroud, I don't want to have that conflict of interest of rooting for him to put up big numbers, but also the Titans winning the game. I just hated that element. It's like why when I bet on a game, I want to bet on a team. I don't like doing over-unders. Don't like rooting for a result. I just like rooting for a team and keeping it simple.
Sure. I have to agree with you on that level once again, which is surprising. And, I always make sure to draft the Bucs defense. I have a few Bucs players on my team, but when there are guys I'm playing in my lineup against the Buccaneers, that's kind of a fucked up situation that I'm not a big fan of. Can I ask you real quick, because I talked about this last week on the episode, kind of how my Bucs fandom came to be and why I chose them, and kind of my relationship with the Bills now moving forward. How did you settle on the Tennessee Titans? Because that's almost just as random to me.
So there's two stories, and it depends on who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to a good friend who
Let's
already
pretend
knows...
you're talking to the Plains.
The Plains?
Yeah.
Oh, I just say that I was born in Nashville.
Okay.
And I like the Titans since then, because like when you meet like someone new at work, or you have a conference call from someone from Seattle and they're talking about the Seahawks, you must say you love the Bills. Like it's kind of uncomfortable. Like, no, I root for the Titans. It's like, oh, that's kind of weird. Why would you root for the Titans?
Right.
So I say, yeah, I was born in Nashville. The reality of the situation is when you were young, like it wasn't cool to root for the Bills. That's what like people just did because their dads rooted for the Bills, and like you make your own choice. They weren't the guys who were necessarily the superstars on Madden. They weren't the ones who ESPN was showing a lot of love to. They were just kind of an anonymous team who didn't make the playoffs for 17 years. Yeah. It wasn't cool to root for them.
That's true.
So I was kind of a bandwagon fan at that time. I liked the Jaguars for a little bit, and then I was just smitten when the Titans came out with those new uniforms. Eddie George had the T with the little flames on the back.
McNair.
Then when they went to the Super Bowl, I was like, this is more than a fling. Like, this is somebody I want to marry, and we've been together ever since then. I got an abusive relationship, though. I'm going to be honest. There's not a lot of sex there. There's not a lot of happiness.
There is ups and downs. I certainly can relate.
Where are the ups?
True. I have to give you credit, because I mentioned this last week as well. There was a lot of pretenders back then. You mentioned how the Bills weren't very good, and now we see almost everyone in the area is Bills Mafia because they're very good, they're dominant, and they have made the playoffs several years in a row. Back then, if you remember, you had Matt rooting for the Saints, you had Brian with the Packers, Kaminsky went with the Giants. I remember Tyler being a Panthers fan for a small amount of time. I'll give you credit, though, because you were a Titans fan as long as I remember, which is as long as me being a Bucs fan, and you never wavered from that. So I think that your fandom is very real. Those other phonies and fakes, immediately when the Bills turned it around, jumped right off the ship. So I got to give you props on that. And you are a notorious team switcher too. I mean, you've been with the Lakers for a long time. I remember you as a Mavs fan, but you've been kind of around the book.
Okay. And I'll explain that. So I think I'm getting a bad rap there. Now, I will acknowledge that at times, if there's a new coach or new player that I like, I tend to follow that team a little bit closer than somebody who is agnostic towards them.
Sure.
But I mean, it's been this way for a while, probably a decade and a half. Lakers for basketball, Kentucky basketball, Florida State football has always been the case.
That's the main, like that's your Bucs
and the Titans. I mean, right. And here's the thing too, like I'm a bigger fan of the sport, I think, than the specific team.
Sure.
So say, for example, Florida State, they're fucking terrible this year.
Yeah.
1-3. Absolutely abysmal to watch play, but I still love college football. I still consume college football podcasts. I still read about it during lunch. I still read about it when I'm having one-on-ones and pretending to talk to somebody at work.
Sure.
Georgia-Bama is going to be one of the biggest games of the year, and I literally cannot wait for that. So my love for the sport typically outweighs my love for the team. I think there's a lot of people who love the Bills, but they don't necessarily care about other teams unless there's fantasy implications.
Right.
And that's how I feel with college basketball. Like, I'm a Kentucky fan, but I love watching Bama play because Nate Oates was the coach at UB, and they're fun to watch play. Like, you can still enjoy the sport while not rooting for a specific team.
100%. You're definitely the biggest college football fan I know, and probably the biggest basketball fan I know as well, which are two things that I really have barely dipped my toes in. Now, obviously, my quote-unquote team, Michigan, won the national championship last year. I barely was a part of that. I took it for granted, to be honest with you. It was something that I should have been more involved with. But this year, with the advent of CFB 25, I'm getting a little more involved with college football. It's very fun to follow. I'm trying to take a peek here and there. I did watch Michigan USC, which was quite a good game. And, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've always preferred the NFL. I probably always will. And this past week, I had to make a very tough choice. It was like a Sophie's Choice type deal. Was it by Madden or by CFB? Obviously, budgetary, time things. I had to make a strict choice there. And I did go with Madden, which was very surprising. But I think that really just shows my love for the NFL. Because much like you said about college football, if there's NFL football on, I'm going to watch it. Doesn't matter who it is. And that's probably the way you feel about college.
So, and before we dive into this, I want to backtrack a little bit towards Michigan because it's something that I've been saying for a while. And if I'm right on a take, like, I'm going to constantly throw it in people's face because I get plenty wrong.
Yeah.
But before Michigan went on their little playoff run, I remember a lot of people saying, like, Michigan needs to move on from Harbaugh. Michigan needs to move on from Harbaugh. And my point I would always say to people is, like, it's not binary where you're winning a national championship or you suck. You could still be in contention and still be a good coach. And just because you fire somebody doesn't mean that you're going to get somebody better. It's the same thing when Bill Smith's like, oh, fire McDermott. Like, yes, does he have some shortcomings? Absolutely, but there's no guarantee the next guy you get in is better. He could be better, but you don't know. And what I would say about Michigan is they had been so average for like a decade and a half.
True.
I kept telling people, like, Harbaugh maybe will never win a title there, which obviously I was wrong about, but he's still got them in top 10. He's still getting them in games that matter. Like, at some point, shit can fall your way. A team that you're playing in the championship could have their quarterback injured or whatever. Now, I didn't foresee them actually dominating and winning a title like last year, but my point is just because something is good and not great doesn't mean you just need to get rid of it.
Well, you ended up being right about that. And if you remember, there was a turning point. The first year they beat Ohio State, because me and you went back and forth on this Harbaugh thing quite a bit, because I was getting sick of him losing every big game, which at that point he had. And I remember saying to you in the group chat, if he doesn't beat Ohio State this year, he just has to go. I know he's good. I know all your points are valid, but it's just... that's what he was brought in for. They're paying him this ridiculous amount of money. He's brought so much eyes on the program. If he doesn't beat them, they just got to cut ties. And there is no guarantee they're going to get anybody better. But that year, they did beat Ohio State. And that, I feel like, turned things around on my side of it. And it ended up working out great. Now, granted, as soon as he won the title, did what he came to do, and all those people left the team, he bolted and went back to the NFL. So how dedicated was he really? He was kind of a fraud.
So I'm going to do 2 points, and then the second point I'm going to pivot to where we compare college to the pros. But the one thing that was extremely unique from Michigan, and the Plains out here may not understand this, so I'll try to break it down in the most simplistic view ever.
Yeah.
So one of the knocks that people have on college football is that it's all about recruiting and it's all about getting the top players, and there's no parity. If you don't have a roster like Georgia, Bama, or Ohio State, you can't win a title.
Sure.
And basically those three programs, and you could throw Clemson in there too, were consistently, it was just one of those four was going to win a title. They get the best players.
Powerhouses.
There's no shot a team like NC State was going to beat Bama, so it's like, why even play the game if you already know who's going to be one of the champions? And what those four schools did is, obviously recruiting, they have kids ranked. There may be 300 kids in the top 300 ranked. Those are all kids that everyone wants. Bama, Ohio State, and Georgia were collecting all those kids. History had shown you can't win a title unless you have elite recruiting, unless you have top 5. Michigan kind of flipped that on their head. Michigan was recruiting fine. It was like top 15 classes, but it wasn't that top echelon. Right. And they'd always said, like, yeah, that's good enough for them to get in the playoffs, but they'll never win a title because they're just having a discrepancy. So Michigan was recruiting top 10, top 15 classes, and their development was so damn good. Like, kids who were not surefire NFL stars, like some of the Bama guys, kids who were just decent prospects who had upside, They developed them and won a title, and it completely changed the narrative of the sport that maybe there shouldn't be such a focus on recruiting and development matters just as much. And they had a lot of nice pieces from the transfer portal, so it became an ongoing discussion that, like, there's 2 ways to skin a cat. You don't just need to get all the 5 stars in your roster, you can win other ways. So they completely changed the dynamic of the sport.
Well, I'm happy to hear that Michigan was responsible for that showing of the 2 different ways to skin a cat. They're fun to watch. I mean, obviously, my fandom for Michigan is auxiliary. I've liked them since I was a kid. I stick with them. Obviously, Brady went there. That adds to it a little bit. I have the history built in. It doesn't really compare with the fandom I have for the Bucks. Switching gears a little bit and kind of going back to something we were talking about, I, myself, joined this past week, a fantasy hockey league. Do you play fantasy basketball or anything like that?
No, so we had tried it in college for a little bit just to kind of... You might have even been in the league.
It's very confusing to me.
Well, that's the thing what makes fantasy football great. And there's some deviance now because football is starting to stretch. Oh, we're going to do a Thursday game. We're going to do a Friday.
Yeah, right.
But it was easy to control because it was one day a week. You didn't have to worry about setting your lineup. You didn't have to worry about one guy playing 4 games a week.
Exactly.
Another guy's playing 2. And that's
right.
what I realized with fantasy basketball. It's like, man, I love the sport. I love watching it. But the guys who I viewed as good in my head aren't necessarily the guys who are fantasy stars. There's a lot of guys who just have a bunch of empty calorie stats where they'll score 40 points, have 20 rebounds, but like it doesn't lead to winning. They're just getting those points and rebounds because somebody has to.
Makes
so
sense.
I've never done it, and I think it's probably too much to follow for me.
Yeah, well, I feel the same way. I'm completely overwhelmed by this. My hockey fandom is light at best. I play a lot of NHL. That's usually how I learned the roster. NHL video game. That's how I learned the roster. So I was with all these rules and prospects, and they go to juniors, they go to the AHL, and you got to name the whatever. I was fucking lost. So what happened was I went there to co-GM with Schufeld. And when we went to the Nowhere Lounge in, I don't know where it is. It's near Buffalo. It's a very cool bar. It's like 70s themed. There's all this 70s style furniture and lighting and all this shit. It's a very cool bar. Very good cocktails. More on that later. So I went there to be a co-GM with Schufelt, and one of the guys ended up dropping out. So then I had to take over my own team, and I didn't know what the fuck was going on. My team's probably going to suck. But I did want to bring this up to you and run this story by you because this was an interesting thing that happened after the draft. So I ran up about a $150 bar tab at Nowhere Lounge, drinking all these crazy cocktails that they have, right? So I was pretty fucking hammered. By the end of the draft, I went with Schufelt, and after the draft, after we had finished, and it was nice. I mentioned last week about Levi and his troubles lately. I got to see him. He looks very healthy. He looks great. Got to see Wes. Got to see a bunch of guys I haven't seen in a long time. It was a great time. I went overboard with the cocktails. So when we left the draft, we had gone to Target. Andy had to run some, family style errands, shit that I really can't relate to at all. But I tagged along with him, so I went with him. I was in that mode, and I do this whether I'm drunk or not to some level. When I'm drunk, I go overboard, where I was talking to people, trying to play pranks on people, trying to make people uncomfortable for Andy's amusement. So we were parking at Target. I see this girl wrangling cart. She looked kind of cute to me. So I was like, oh, pull over there. Let me talk to her.
15 years old.
Probably was. And I was like, well, I want to talk to her, blah, blah, blah. I want to try and get her number. We missed her, whatever. We go into Target. We come out. Then we went to Wegmans, and I'm like trying to talk to like different workers there. I'm trying to find an attractive girl that I can like ask for her number, something like that. I just really was trying to put on a show for Andy. I was also half in the bag, well, fully in the bag. So I was like really obnoxious and annoying. And when we were driving out of the Target parking lot, I was like, yo, see if you can find that girl. And as he was driving to approach the girl, a male, probably teenager cart wrangler came up. And I just rolled down the window. I was like, yo, what's up, man? You got a boyfriend? And he was like, oh, no. And he was
Hold
like...
on, the boy said this?
Yes.
Okay.
He was like, oh, no. And Andy was like, dude, why? And I thought it was fucking hilarious because I think I'm just fucking Joe... Is it Joe? No. Richard. I think I'm Richard Pryor when I'm drunk. Like, I think I'm the funniest fucking guy in the world, and everything I do is just beyond hilarious, even though necessarily might not be that funny. So I said that to the kid. He rolls off, whatever. We go up to the intersection to turn on a transit, and this lady pulls up next to us. I roll down the window again, and I'm like, hey, what's up? How you doing? She's like, that was disgusting what you just did. And I was like, what? She's like, that was absolutely disgusting what you said to that kid. And I yelled out, oh, yeah, I want to fuck him. Yeah, no, that's why I asked him, because I want to fuck him. And then we pulled off. And Andy was kind of like, dude, why would you do that? And I was like, well, wasn't that funny? He was like, not really, dude. It kind of was uncomfortable. Like, I come here all the time. Like, that kid brings my groceries out. Like, it's going to be awkward now. And I was like, whatever. It happens. We move on. Because I figure they might have a story to tell now. And, we move on. And everyone's okay. I didn't harm anybody.
Favor.
Whatever. It's whatever. The fact that a lady yelled at a 33-year-old for asking a kid if he had a boyfriend, I thought that was very funny.
Well, hold on. You think that you being a 33-year-old or she being ridiculous? Which
both?
Okay,
Both elements. Yeah, they were both hilarious.
The fact that they would expect a 40-year-old to show up to work every day.
Right, exactly. So I came home, I passed right out. I woke up with a severe fucking headache, drove over to my mom's, told her the story. She's like, oh my God, she expects this type of behavior from me because she's seen it a million times. The next day, I wake up with this long text from Andy, and he was like, listen, man, we gotta talk about this because it's been bothering me a lot about the Target situation. And, I don't know why you did that. I mean, I think you were probably trying to be funny and you were just being obnoxious and drunk, but that was pretty uncool, man. And like I've done that type of stuff when I'm drunk, but to see it from the other side, it made me uncomfortable. But what was interesting and what was even funnier, this added an even funnier wrinkle to it, was after that part of the text, which I completely understood. I was like, dude, I apologize. I was being an ass. I was drunk. I was trying to make you laugh. I guess it didn't land. Sometimes you take a swing and a miss. The follow-up was the greatest because this is something where he really showed how good of a friend he was, but this is just so fucking ridiculous. He says, and look it, man, I know you were asking a lot of people, like, if they had a boyfriend or you're trying to get the number or whatever, but I just want to let you know, like, I'm your good friend. Like, if you want to talk about something, like, if you're attracted to guys or whatever, like, if you have that feeling, I want you to know that we can talk about that. I don't know if you were serious or whatever, but if that's something that you want to ever talk to someone about, I know it's hard to come out. I know it's hard to admit those feelings. And I almost thought he was fucking with me. Like, the first thing I wrote back to him was like, dude, LOL. But, like, the fact that my obnoxiousness and annoyingness of being hammered actually made a guy that I've known for 20 years question my sexuality, that's just some funny shit. I just couldn't believe that even happened. I thought that was fucking amazing. And I told him, I tried to straighten things out. If someone thinks you're gay, there's really nothing you can say. You can deny it. That makes you look gay. You could lie. If you are gay, that makes you look gay. There's really nothing you can really say. So I just kind of tried to thank him for his being a good friendness while also pointing out the ridiculousness of the situation. But I had to point that out because, I don't know, dude, I just like fucking around with people. It's just something I've always enjoyed.
I mean, there's an art to it. It typically
100%.
is a lot of fun. I'm a little bit more choosy with it now, just because obviously I have girls, and like my worst fear is like getting arrested in the newspaper for doing something silly, and then like them feeling the brunt of it at school. But in a way, like I just feel like he was just being very empathetic and caring there. Like he probably didn't actually think you were gay, but he's like, you know what? If maybe he's drinking this much and this is a thing that's
right, it's like
bothering
coming
him.
out. Yeah,
so,
yeah.
And
he's such a good guy, and he's such a fucking good guy. Like, just the way he presented the whole thing, the fact that he brought it to my attention instead of, like, stewing on it or, like, questioning it or whatever, I really appreciated that. But, I mean, I guess one thing I disagreed with him about, though, was and I gotta point this out, I don't think asking someone if they have a boyfriend is that aggressive or rude. I think that's actually a fairly polite way to show interest in someone without forwardly hitting on them or asking for their number. And I think that the lady who yelled at me, I could be wrong about this, maybe she knew I was up to shenanigans, I think she was blatantly homophobic, and it was the gay factor that made her pissed off and thought it was so gross, because I didn't say anything gross. I wasn't like, yo man, can I suck your dick? I was just like, yo, do you got a boyfriend? That's all I said. I think she was a homophobe.
Yeah, that's probably the only conclusion I would have from there. There's nothing else you could do.
Yeah, it was what it was. It was a funny situation. We cleared it up. Everything's all good, but, I got to watch myself. I've noticed that, and you've probably seen some of my ramblings in the group chat. Most of those are spurned on by some sort
Hard
of
to miss, buddy.
Liquid courage of some kind. I don't know that I have an alcohol problem in the sense where, like, I wake up with the shakes or, like, I crave that I have to drink every day. But when I get the ball rolling, it's very hard for me to stop.
You're right. That doesn't sound like a problem at all.
and I think that I'm so funny. I did another little prank on Angelo and Tyler because they haven't paid their fee for the fantasy league. So what I thought was a funny angle was to sympathetically try to position it where I know they're hurting for money. You know what I mean? Like, text them both and be like, look, guys, I know it's a tough time. Tyler, you don't have a job. Ange, I know you're starting up a business. You got this Balzers Act deal. If you don't have the $50, dude, I totally get it. I can front you guys. Granted, I know they have the money. I thought that was fucking hilarious. When I read it back the next day, wasn't really that funny.
I don't remember that one specifically.
Well, you didn't see that because that was direct to each of them. It wasn't in the group. Yeah, I was trying to... I don't know. I was probably upset. First of all, Denver smashed Tampa, which just fucked my whole day up. Then I'm trying to draft this team. Then I got, fucking... I'm seeing Levi. That's making me feel crazy. And then, and then I'm trying to hit on guys, and then nothing worked out that day. It was a bad day.
What did the guy say? He said no?
He just said no and just was like, I was like, no.
I mean, maybe I would have think that was an opening. Like, no, I don't have a boyfriend. And he was interested in you. And you just drove off. So she probably was like, you left that guy hanging. Like, that's disgusting behavior.
Why would you leave that opening? You had a perfect shot. Yeah, that's disgusting. How could you do this?
She's like the love or date guru, and she was just criticizing it. Like, what the fuck was that?
Why would you ask him that if you're not even going to follow up and hit on him? It's ridiculous.
It's like at the bar, like, you buy the girl a drink, and then as soon as she gets it, just walking away. She's
taking
like,
up. That's disgusting to me. Oh, that was some funny shit. Can I ask you a personal question?
I feel like you're gonna anyway, but go for it.
Have you had Jersey Mike's yet?
No, but I drive by it every single day.
It's banging. And usually I don't love chain sub places. Like Subway sucks, Firehouse kind of gross. Jersey Mike's is banging. I got a full Jersey Mike's that I did not eat before you got here because I have this weird superstition about eating before doing a show where it makes you tired and sluggish, and I am very excited. Jersey Mike's is the shit. Everyone should go there.
Are they sponsoring the show?
We drop a lot of names on here of businesses that we frequent. We haven't yet got a sponsorship, but hopefully we can maybe go down that road. Let's talk about something else real quick. So we talked about the Target story. You mentioned something last week after the Bills-Dolphins game, which I covered on the podcast last week. On Monday night, the Bills thrashed Jacksonville. I mean, absolutely destroyed them. Now, granted, Jacksonville doesn't look too good, but still. On this very podcast, me and Mike sat here talking about the Bills' upcoming season, and I've been very critical of their willingness to let go of Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. I think that was kind of crazy. I've been critical of McDumbass here and again and in the past, and I will continue to. But you mentioned last week that you think they might be the best team in the league, and it's hard for me to argue with that. And I don't know how to explain it because when you look at their roster on paper, they don't seem like they should be that good. And they are killing people out here.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I had said that at a point. Clearly, I was just trying to get in the good graces of the other two boys.
That's what it always seems like.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like. I mean, it's hard to say. It's 3 weeks, and the thing with football, and you have a salary cap, there's so much parity in the league. So, perfect example, like the Bucs looked like one of the best teams in the NFC, and then they lay an egg to the Broncos. There's no saying that the Bills can't lose by 40 to the Ravens this week. I know that's a thing that attracts you to football. I don't necessarily like it because it just feels like there's some randomness and there's no week-to-week meaning behind the games. But no, I mean, they do. You have arguably... No, he's not arguably. He's not the best quarterback in the league. I don't even care if people who think Mahomes is a little down this year. Josh Allen looks like the best quarterback in 2024 in a vacuum.
Sure.
And I could make a very strong case that he's the second best quarterback in the league. So anytime you have a guy of that echelon, you're always going to be in it. McDermott may struggle against the elite teams, but he still has a good track record for winning the games that he's supposed to. There's still talent on the roster. I think that the OC has done a really good job of spreading it out.
Yeah.
It felt like in the end, and I'm not a Bills fan, but this is just my perception. I don't follow as closely as some of the listeners. It felt like they were trying to force feed Diggs to keep him happy, and obviously it blew up in their face. But it seems like they have a more balanced attack right now. James Cook looks awesome.
He does.
Obviously, I'm a big Keon Coleman fan, being an
Got
FSU
his
guy.
Finally up. See, the thing with them is this roster, they're killing people right now. And it's got to be part coaching. It's got to be game plan. It has to be... See, that's what I love about the NFL. It's like styles make fights. Like, now, I predicted it because I knew that the Bucs choke against teams they're favored against. I had a bad feeling about the Denver game, but anyone on the outside looking in would figure, well, Tampa just beat Detroit. They have to roll Denver. They just have to. And they got fucking smoked. That's what I love about the NFL. And we've seen that week by week. Our survivor pool, we have 12 people in it. It's already over. Everyone's fucking done because everyone picked the Bengals against New England. Every week there's these matchups that just are fucking crazy. The thing with the Bills is I love what they're doing right now. I just don't know if I'm sold on it yet because I just look at that roster, and I feel like in the NFL, at some point or another, and they have some big tests coming up. They played a couple weak teams. I don't know how good Arizona is. Miami's fucked without Tua. They're done. And Jacksonville obviously doesn't look great. They have some big tests coming up. But what I wonder is this whole wide receiver by committee thing, it works against certain teams. It's a good idea, but you do need someone eventually to step up and make plays at the receiver position.
So it's funny you say that. So Cole, one of our fellow Du Bois members,
shout out to Cole.
He's very objective, and a lot of times, like, he doesn't get too emotional about talking about the Bills. So we were talking about it Monday night, and I said, "Do you think this team can win a Super Bowl?" And we were talking like, "Yeah, they look good, but when it gets in the playoffs, they don't have that superstar power. Can just take over a game." I mean, Allen obviously is an absolute superstar,
Sure.
but if you're on defense, is there a receiver out there who just terrifies the hell out of you? On defense, there's some very good, solid players, but is there any all-world players like Fred Warner or Myles Garrett?
Levante David,
yeah.
Vita Vea, Antoine Winfield Jr., the list goes on.
None of those guys are Bills, you're right.
Right. So here's the thing. It's like that Miami game, if you're lining up and you're Tua and you got Waddle and you got fucking Hill and you got whoever, I don't know how you say his name, A-Chain, whatever. You line up in the fucking pocket and you look across from you and you see Taylor Rapp and DeMar Hamlin. I'm thinking you're going to have a fucking field day, right? Like, you got to be excited. But he fucking laid an egg. Like, he sucked. And I just wonder, like, the Bills are obviously coached very well. They obviously know how to play to their strengths. But when they match up with a team like the Chiefs, who's their Darth Vader, that's their arch nemesis, did they retool enough to match up with a team with that much firepower? Because now you got the Chiefs. They've added Worthy. They've added Smith-Schuster, who's making plays for them. They got those guys. And I just, when push comes to shove and the games get serious, I want to believe in it. Billieve. I want to believe. And they're blowing people out. And you know what's interesting, too, is the Bills... Mike sent me something. It was something on Twitter that said...
I'm guessing it wasn't in the last week.
It wasn't. It was several weeks ago. But he sent me something that the Bills have not won. It's like they haven't had a close game at all, or they haven't lost by more than like 10 points in like 3 years.
Who cares? It doesn't matter if you lose by 10 or 3. I don't think it makes a big difference.
No, that's very true. However, when you do beat Jacksonville 47-10, that does make a big statement.
The last time they got blown out might have been the COVID year against the Titans, and we whooped them 42-16.
I think that probably was the last blowout. Someone can check on that.
The only other one I kind of remember is just because I was rooting strongly for the Bills, is when it was Jonathan Taylor came to town, and the Colts just ripped the Bills.
Oh, I was at that game.
Yeah,
that was a bad
I don't know.
one.
I think that one might have came after the Titans game, so that
I think
might
it was.
actually be it.
Yeah, same year. So we're talking 2021 at that point.
I think it would have been the year with the overtime game against the Chiefs. I could be wrong.
It was the year that the Rams beat the Bengals in the Super Bowl.
I don't know. And I'll kind of, this will be like more of a deep dive, and I don't think this is anything that's necessarily secret, but like, I'm starting to grow fond of the Bills. I'm certainly not a fan per se, and I definitely wouldn't root for them over the Titans. But
you're not in the mafia.
But I'm not in the mafia.
Right.
I know people in the mafia, but I'm
I
not
know
in
several
the mafia.
people in the mafia. Yes,
but no, I think it's working in downtown, like dealing with Bills fans overall, and like actually getting to experience being around them and seeing their happiness. Like, I like it for the city.
Yeah.
I think like during COVID, all I would see is the online people, and they're annoying as fuck. And I would always just think like the Bills mafia is the most annoying fan base in the world. I want them to lose. I'm sick of listening to these fucking people. But then like you realize like online is a poor representation of the actual population.
Of course.
And how many of these Bills fans are actually reasonable, good people?
Most of them.
And I think Bills drafting Keon Coleman definitely made me feel better.
Isn't Kincaid from fucking...
Nah, he's a Utah guy.
Oh, okay.
But, I mean, even Josh, like, he's not like an arrogant prick. Like, he seems like a likable, down-to-earth guy.
The only thing about him that bothers me is that he is probably the most apt to complaining and begging for flags. And that doesn't bother me on the surface because it's actually very smart. And a lot of times it works, and he'll get the flag, and that's a smart thing to do. That part doesn't bother me. What bothers me about it is how the quote-unquote mafia won't admit that he does that more than anyone and they were the ones who always thought that Brady complained the most and got all the
say
flag.
that about.
Right. And he is just as guilty, if not more, than any quarterback we've ever seen as far as asking for flags. As far as fucking talent's concerned and being exciting to watch, I mean, how cool is it that you can watch Buffalo and see someone like Josh Allen playing quarterback? It's pretty fucking amazing considering the list of shitty-ass QBs that we've had to live through.
And
it's an exciting thing.
100%. And think about through our childhood, like how anonymous the Bills were at 17 years old. So it is like a cool
great.
element to it. And this is going to dive a little bit deeper, and I think it took me a while to realize this. Like, for a while, I hated Josh Allen. And then, like, I would ask myself, like, why do you hate him? And I just realized because early on, I had said that it was a terrible pick, and I was
so you're holding on to that,
attached
right? Yeah.
to being right. And
I had that happen,
And
too.
at a certain point, I was just like, people don't really, one, probably remember my opinion, and two, give a shit about it. Like, why am I so firmly staunch? Why am I... It's not an indication to me. It's not like when the Titans win a Super Bowl, people are going to have more respect and think more highly of me.
Oh, really? Because I thought that people loved me after the Bucs won.
Well, there was an exception with you. It's a little different.
All right. I thought everyone felt like I won the Super Bowl at that point.
And this goes... And there's going to be a couple layers here, and then I'll let you unpick them one by one. I always thought, like, people would identify with your team so much. You just realize, like, most people don't give a shit if your team's winning or losing and don't think anything of it other than you root for that team. And whenever we have new people at work, we always ask them, like, for fun facts. And they always say, like, they're a Bills fan. I was like, there's nothing fun about that.
That's not a fun fact, yes. That is not a fun fact.
My boss would always say that, like, being a Bills fan is not a personality trait. And people just identify themselves with their team so much. And the most likable people to me are when their teams are losing, they're miserable, but they're funny about it.
Right.
Like, the Titans suck ass, and instead of going to work and, like, me getting bitter or, like, complaining to people, just making a joke about it. Like, yeah, Levis is a fucking moron.
He sucks.
Yeah.
But... See, that's the thing, and I wish you had watched last week, and I can only... Have you ever watched the show?
Yeah, I just don't remember any of it.
So last week, I really went deep on this and talked about it quite a bit. I do think liking the Bills around here, that's not a personality trait. Liking a different team can be linked with your personality. And I think that people who know me more than an acquaintance level, or even at an acquaintance level, to me, and this could be egotistical or narcissistic perhaps, when they see that flag on the screen, I think they think of me.
Yeah, it's probably possible because it's not like it's the Jets or like Giants where you're just bound to run into some of those people.
Yeah.
When it's just like such a random team that doesn't have any connection to the area. That will happen. And I'll give you an example of one of the guys I used to work with. His name is Jeff. He's a Nebraska football fan. Anytime I see Nebraska, I was like, oh, I wonder what.
Right,
what
you
Jeff's
never
doing.
forgot that.
Right,
exactly.
But there is something to that, and you know, I think sometimes like when I have a belief, the question I've been asking, or when I've been rooting for something, is, do I actually have this belief, or is this me just trying to do something different from everyone else?
Yeah.
And if I don't have a firm answer as to why I have that belief, I really start to challenge it.
Just let
but
it
like
go.
rooting for the Titans or like rooting for the Bucks, like you're not doing that to be different. You've held on to that for 25 years.
Being different is just a byproduct of it. It's just an extra thing that comes along with it. That's not why you did that, but it certainly sets you apart from the norm here. Can I ask you another personal question?
I mean, the first one wasn't really that personal. I asked if I've had Jersey Mike's.
I thought that was very personal, personally.
Well, if it's in that realm, we'll give it a go.
Are you planning on voting this year?
So that's kind of a sticky subject.
That is personal, isn't it?
Yeah, no, not for me specifically, but this is a funny... Well, I don't know if she'll find it funny, but I find it funny. So I've been seeing this girl for maybe about 2 months at this point.
Canadian girl.
Yeah, it's, you know, it is what it is. There's certainly challenges that come with this, but, you know, she's pretty unique, so there is a part of me that's, like, felt things I haven't felt before this early, so I'm definitely seeing where it goes, certainly not getting too attached to it.
It's going good, though.
But definitely happy, definitely somebody who makes me laugh.
Love to hear that.
She's extremely well educated and in her politics, which obviously not American politics, but there's going to be a shit ton of overlap.
Sure.
And the one night we were walking to the bar, we started talking about politics and how we met, and I had told people, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna just say we met at a Trump rally, and then I took you to the MAGA party afterwards. She's like, kind of laughing and was kind of irritated, and she's like, do you even vote? And I said, no, why would I vote? It doesn't change anything. And she genuinely got mad at me for 5 minutes and explained, like, there's people I work with every single day who your vote depends on their livelihood. And that's more at, like, the local level.
Of course.
But she's like, you have a right to vote. You have a right to have this strong belief. Like, you should vote especially when you have daughters, you don't know what's going to affect. And to me, I've always just said, like, my vote isn't going to make a difference, even if the president's not going to change the trajectory of my life. But she made an excellent point, like, yes, but it could impact somebody you love. There could be some homeless guy who's not going to have the resources because you voted one way. And then I'm going to add one more layer. I don't think I have the right to vote because I'm not educated enough. And
That's what I always say.
I think if you're not educated, you shouldn't have the right to vote.
Right, I'm not involved. Like, why would you want me voting? I don't follow it. I don't know anything about it. Me going there is irresponsible. I'm doing a good thing by taking myself out of the fucking race. And what people always say, people get pissed when you tell them you don't vote sometimes. They get really fucking offended by that. They think that you're, like, really leaving this right on the table. It's like... And what they'll always say, or not always, but a lot of times one thing they'll point out is like, well, if everybody thought like you, then blah, 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 blah. But it's like, everyone's not going to think like me. Let's face the facts. New York is going to be blue.
That's
gonna happen. No matter what. You can go do what you want, whatever. It's going to be blue. It's just a fact. And me voting or not voting is not going to fucking change anything at the end of the day.
It's not. And here's the other thing, too. I have people in my life, and I'm not talking about the Canadian girl, who want or get mad when I don't vote. But then I said, okay, so you're cool if I vote for Trump? And then they're like, no, do not vote for Trump. So like, you want me to vote, but it's only
right. It's like the right to vote means I make the choice, right? You only want me to do what helps you. You don't really want me to vote. You just want an extra person backing your team.
Well, and it's like when people ask for honest feedback, they want honest feedback until it's too critical, and then they get defensive.
Exactly.
So that's, I mean, I'm in management now. For you all folks out there who want to be impressed, and the one thing I realize is, like, you have to be honest with people, but you also, like, have to sugarcoat it to a certain way, and everyone's going to be different. But if you just sit there and tell them, like, that was the worst thing I've ever heard, like, this is absolute crap, like, you really need to pick it up, you're not going to have a job, that doesn't fucking motivate people. It doesn't make them happier. If anything, it just pisses them off. And you have all these older generation people like, oh, society's so soft, so weak. And I always want to say, like, did things ever motivate you to do better when someone was screaming their head off? Like, most science would suggest that's not how you get results from people.
A lot of people just shut down at that
they
point.
may react out of fear, but that's not their best. They're just scared not to lose something instead of trying to win something. So it always drives me nuts when people, no one can handle criticism these days. Like, yeah, you can also deliver criticism without being a complete ass.
Well, delivery has a lot to do with it. We touched on that not too long ago in the group chat, because we were talking about Harrison Butker and about his whatever he did speech at it was at a college, right? He did a speech.
Yeah, he donated a bunch of money to the Salvation Army. People were livid.
That's insane.
It's also not what happened,
of course, but it was very much. My point was that a lot of times delivery can make a huge impact. You can almost make the same point, but how you choose to present it to the person makes a huge difference on how it will be received. Whereas he might have, I don't even know what he said, and I feel so stupid talking about it.
Basically, the crux of it is he was speaking to a group of college students, and it just kind of talked about how the most important thing a woman can be is a mom, and I think, like, the hearth of their home. Basically, he was diminishing them in the workforce. That's the best way to put it. And while I definitely don't agree with what he said, obviously having daughters, that's not something I want them to hear. The argument I would always say to people is, like, you got to consider his audience. While there are probably women in there who didn't necessarily like it, he was speaking to, like, a very Christian or Catholic, whatever school it was, who's going to hold those beliefs more than most places. And he wasn't broadcasting it on Facebook or Instagram Live to all his people out there. I don't agree with what he said.
Even if he was, though, fuck it. Who cares?
But my point is,
he should be allowed to do that.
He's still allowed to say it.
Well, yeah, that's how I feel, too. You should be allowed to say whatever the fuck, and then anyone can have whatever fucking reaction they want to it also.
Yeah, I'm not saying he shouldn't have got repercussions, like he deserves some of the backlash. I have people in my life who said, well, he shouldn't be allowed to say that at school, and my thing is, like, we can't just, I don't know, you and I kind of got into it, you can't just censor people because you don't like what they have to say. I don't know
if we got into it.
We didn't get out of it.
I think me and Tyler were on the same page as far as that he didn't get censored. Because it did happen. He
didn't get censored, but if ahead of time he had told a certain school, this is what I'm going to talk about, he may have been asked not to do it.
Right.
And we have no way of knowing that for sure.
I agree that would be fucked up. Like, he should be allowed to say those beliefs if those are his beliefs. I mean, it's just his beliefs. Like, and Cole had the best take, really. He's a fucking kicker, so who gives a fuck what he says anyway? I mean, why is he even speaking somewhere? What authority does he have on fucking anything besides kicking a fucking ball?
That was the other thing we talked about. Yeah. Like, who cares what a celebrity thinks politically? Like, I get they have the platform and millions of people are listening, but how is Taylor Swift or LeBron James more qualified to talk about an issue than you or I? Now, maybe they have people in their ear who are highly educated about, but like, that's not necessarily the people I want to listen to when I'm looking for political advice.
Well, what's fucked up is that there's so many dumb fucking people that like they'll just go along with the Taylor Swift or go along with the LeBron James because they really view them with this reverence, not realizing that they're just another fucking human being that makes good songs or can play basketball really well. LeBron James might be in some fucking trouble soon.
The P. Diddy thing?
Yeah, because he's on tape saying there ain't no party like a Diddy party, and that's becoming very clear.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's factually not incorrect.
That is true.
There's no podcast like
that.
a Burning Bridges podcast. Like, yes, it is unique in its own setup. Obviously, he probably didn't have ill intent there. But,
let's hope.
Well, yeah, let's hope. He hasn't come out and said he didn't have ill intent, so you never know.
He's going to have to make a statement on that. A lot of people are running away. I saw that, I don't know if this is confirmed, I think I saw that Leo DiCaprio fled the country. Jay-Z has said nothing. He's been very quiet thus far.
Wait, is this an actual thing, or is this like one of your little
This is
gimmicks?
something I read, and this is something that I watched on YouTube. I had seen that Leo left the country. That could be a coincidence. I don't know. Fled might be not the right word. I'm sure he goes out of the country on the often. Jay-Z has said nothing. He's photographed at a lot of these parties. He's tight with Diddy. I mean, there's a lot of people.
It doesn't mean he was partaking in anything.
It doesn't, but it doesn't mean he wasn't. And there's questions abound. So who knows? This Diddy thing is very fucking interesting to me.
I have not really followed the Diddy thing. Give me a Spark Notes version. I understand that there was some girls involved and some sexual assault, but that's kind of the extent I know of it.
So basically, Diddy, a Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, the CEO of Bad Boy Records.
Being a little bad boy, huh?
Everyone knows P. Diddy. Everyone knows Puff Daddy. He threw these crazy-ass parties where all these celebrities would come, like people like Jennifer Aniston and Matthew Broderick and Howard Stern and all these different rappers. And
Matthew
shit like
Broderick was the name you thought of?
Matthew Broderick and Sarah Jessica Parker, they're in a bunch of pictures. They haven't said anything either. So basically, the thing that's so funny to me about this is that in the official FBI like affidavit thing, they use the term freak-offs. Because that's what P. Diddy used to have. He used to have what's called freak-offs. They found like 1,000 bottles of baby oil when they raided his home. And I guess what he used to do, what they're claiming that he used to do, was basically have these giant parties where all these celebrities would come by, but then in some of the back rooms, they would have these freak-offs where there were these like sex workers there. There was like underage people maybe there. Like there's claims that Usher was there at 15. There's claims that Justin Bieber got brought into the mix as an underage person. And there's claims basically that Puff Daddy is supplying these people with drugs, with IV drips to recover. Like, it's just out of control parties.
Recover from what, exactly?
To recover from the extensive drug use and the extensive physical toll that these freak-offs take on the body. Because there's been leaked audio that's supposedly Puff Daddy and Meek Mill engaging in fornication that includes penetration.
So I always just thought this was like a crazy conspiracy thing, and then like obviously I saw some of the news that he had gotten in trouble. But is this stuff substantiated, or is this just some crazy thing in the corner of Twitter?
Well, he is in jail right now, and it was a federal charge, and he's going to be in federal court. And usually when the feds are involved, there is some substantial backing and some sort of evidence to substantiate that. I don't know how legit it is, but it's very interesting to me because it kind of just goes back to this whole thing where it was like the Wild Wild West back then. Like, you know, if you go back to the 70s, 80s, even the 90s, when the internet came out and things started to change a little bit, like now we're going back retroactively. I mean, can you imagine what these big-time fucking rappers did at their parties? Like, just imagine the influence, control, money, wealth, drug access, like the type of things that were going on at these parties, I'm sure weren't on the up and up to whatever degree. But I guess he's indicted on some sort of racketeering charges, supplying drugs, sex trafficking, things like that, and he's in prison right now. So it's very legitimate. As far as, I don't know, I just find it interesting because I always enjoyed the back and forth between 50 Cent and Puff Daddy, and I always enjoyed like the lore of Puff Daddy being kind of a fruitcake and like saying weird things to people. Like there's this video of him on Drink Champs where like he's asking Fabulous like why he doesn't party with him and shit like that. And then 50 Cent went on the Breakfast Club and mentioned how like Puff Daddy one time asked him to take him shopping, and he thought that was super fruity, and it really offended him. So he's a weird dude. He does some weird fucking shit. So I'm interested in to see what comes out with this. And I think what's most interesting about it is that like if he flips and gives people a list of names or like starts ratting on people, like this could take a lot of different people down in the entertainment industry, for sure.
Yeah, I've never really understood the appeal of him, and maybe that's just because I got into that music like after his kind of highlight of his actual rapping career, but I never really thought he was that talented. Like when I listen to some of the songs, like I guess maybe it's just not for me, but the way he's revered, I just never understood.
Good producer, great businessman, but he says it himself in one of their major hits, Don't Worry If I Write Rhymes, I Write Checks. He's notoriously known for not writing any raps whatsoever. I mean, he was mostly known for bringing Biggie on the scene and owning Bad Boy Records, but at the same time, a lot of those people that signed to Bad Boy, once they signed with Bad Boy, their career kind of went downhill. They were either one-hit wonders or whatever, and there's questions in regards to that as far as like, well, what didn't they want to do? What didn't they want to participate in? And the people who made it, what did they do to get there? Because Puff Daddy right now is looking like a weirdo, like a guy who fucks
it sounds
people.
like it. Wasn't it? Was it Death Row Records, the one with Suge Knight?
Yes.
That all that terrifying stuff would happen. That's the thing, though. When you hear these stories, I always wonder, like, is this just a completely crazy conspiracy QAnon thing? Was there actually some truth to that? And it's hard to confirm. But yeah, speaking of rap music, I was kind of joking the other day. I was listening to music while I was putting some stuff in a spreadsheet, and someone had said, "Oh, do you listen to rap music?" And I said, "Nah, I don't really listen to that horse shit." You know, like, what's wrong with rap? It's like, no, I loved it when I was in like middle school and high school, but this new rap, like, I couldn't name one actual artist.
Sure.
And I mean, part of me was just playing a shtick and just trying to be a little bit funny, but then I got thinking about it, like, who is even a big rapper these days? I know Kendrick Lamar and Meek Mill, but that's about it. I mean, Drake, I guess, too.
I think Travis Scott is someone who's
I know him then.
Outside of that, man, it's hard to even think. I'm off the grid with that shit too. I'm out of the loop. So yeah, I mean, it just, things kind of just transformed. Like Future had a little run, Drake's run has been long, Migos had a little run, but like we're years removed from that now. So I don't really know who's dominating the game. Even if you think of someone like Kendrick Lamar, like he popped on the scene in like 2013. So as far as new guys who are like doing it big, I really don't even fucking know.
So I guess what I'm asking is it just not as big when we were in school, or are we just not paying attention to it? Because like I remember like G-Unit and 50 Cent. Like I absolutely loved those guys and thought they were larger than life. Are superstars like that around and it's just not on my radar, or is it...
It's a little bit of both, I think. Not being plugged into it is a big part of it, but then also the way things are consumed. You know, MTV's not as big. People don't listen to the radio. They get their music all different kind of ways. So things are more split up. Whereas before, it was kind of homogenized. Like everyone got their shit from certain avenues. So it was easier to control who got big and who everyone heard. There aren't really big stars anymore because everyone can just listen to whatever the fuck they want on Spotify or whatever. And I think that kind of dilutes things a little bit as far as like big time people. The only big time pop star now is like Taylor Swift. I'm gonna piss real quick and then we can...
Yeah.
I'll check the time too.
Piss it up.
Just take over for a sec.
Yeah, I will take over for a sec.
Oh yeah, we're looking good.
We're looking good?
Get towards wrapping
You
up.
need me to keep talking, or you pause it?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to keep talking here. So I obviously I'm in Cody's apartment. Cody moved here a couple months ago, and when I had first walked in, it looked like he had just moved in, and it just kind of shows you like how much time flies. Like in my head, he had only been here for a couple weeks, and then he told me, no, I've been here since early August, and I always wonder, like, because we're so consumed with our own lives, like how much stuff changes. Like I'll look at people on Instagram and just remember, I forgot they dated, and then they have like 2 fucking kids already, and you just realize like, wow, like a lot happens when you're not paying attention. One of the quotes that I one time heard is, you'll stop thinking what people think of you when you realize how little they do. And the crux of it is just pretty much that, like, we're all self-conscious and paranoid what others think of us, but 99.9% of the people in your orbit are not thinking about you today. Like that random person you'll see on Instagram pop up and wonder what they're doing. You haven't thought about them in months, and they haven't thought about you. That's why I always tell people, like, don't necessarily worry about how you come off in this situation. I'll give you a good example. A couple years ago, I had a very awkward encounter with a coworker, and it was a coworker who I admired and wanted to be in their good graces. And like for an hour, I just kept like overplaying in my head, like, man, what could I have done better? Why they're probably gonna think I'm weird now. And I was in therapy at the time too, and I brought that up to my therapist, and he just said like they're probably not even thinking of it at all. They probably, just because it was awkward in your head, it was probably just another interaction for them. And it was so freeing to hear that and just realize like a lot of the stuff that we think is a big deal typically is not a big deal. In this podcast, you love doing it. I love joining you, and we're not going to overthink about it and just realize, it's going to millions of people. Oh my goodness, can you believe that he said that about P. Diddy and it was incorrect? It was not fact checked. Once I started to have that mindset that like you just don't necessarily need to be tied to all this other stuff and just leaving expectations away, it's the happiest I've ever been.
You have to do that, and you have to realize that, and you have to not give a fuck about that. And there is a flip side to that too. Think of the times when we've screenshotted people's postings and sent them in the group chat and all had a nice chuckle about it, and we actually did spend time poking fun at them or deriding them. Does it really mean anything? No, they'll never know about it. It doesn't really fucking matter. It does happen. It's probably pretty rare, and for the most part, you are correct. I would hope that on some level we're reaching people or they care about it or whatever, but nobody cares about it as much as I do. I know that, and even if someone did find that I said something wrong or that I fucked up or whatever, I'm never going to know about it anyway. So it's better to approach it and live as if no one gives a fuck.
Well, and there's a couple elements to that too. You're doing this because you enjoy it, and when you enjoy stuff and are just doing it because you enjoy it, that's where results start to come. I think a lot of people just get so tied to these expectations that I'm doing it to get to point B.
Sure.
And it's kind of like the backwards law thing. Like if you really want something to happen or are desperately trying to get it into your life, whether it be a girlfriend or a job or 1 million subscribers, like in a way you end up blocking that. When you just let go of the expectations, like I'm just going to keep doing this because I love it, that's when the results come. I mean, think about, I know this is kind of a lame example, but think about fucking dating. Like anytime you've been really attached to being with a girl, like it never fucking works out.
Well, yeah,
You're
you can't
repelled by
force anything. Yeah, it's
but when you have no expectations, you're like, I'm just gonna fuck around, be me, have fun. Like, yeah, it might not happen, but it also probably will happen because it's a more attractive energy. And it's the same thing with your job too.
Sure.
If you desperately want that gig, you're gonna be nervous as hell. You're gonna overthink everything. If you're just like, look, I got a good job, I wouldn't mind getting an offer here. I'm just gonna go and relax, see how it goes, and have no expectations. That's typically when you come across best.
No expectations is key, and it comes back to putting stuff on a pedestal. Like when you really care that much, it's like it can be devastating to not get it, but if you just let go of that a little bit, like you said, you'll oftentimes be more likely to get it, and also if it doesn't work out, you're kind of covered anyway because you don't really give a fuck, which is kind of how I like to approach things for the most part.
No, I mean, that's a good way to do it. I can't remember the exact quote, and I'm sure one of you people out there listening it, but it was basically like all unhappiness is just the root of expectations. Like I'll give you a perfect example. If let's just say the Bills go 14-3 this year and end up losing in the Super Bowl, if your expectations that it was Super Bowl or bust and they were going to go undefeated, you're going to be fucking miserable. Mm-hmm. But if you just enjoy the season, like this is a hell of a ride, it's a lot of fun, like you're typically going to get more results out of it. Now, granted, it is a really good team, so Super Bowl or bust may be a little bit more relevant.
Yeah, you might think that.
But I just think being attached to outcome is like one of the most dangerous things in the world. There would be so many times in my life where I would just be attached to a certain outcome, and when things weren't happening, I would just try to force it to have that outcome, and it pretty much never came to fruition.
100%. When Brady was on the Bucks, there was a lot of pressure that I felt even for them that they had to be good. Granted, it worked out. They won the Super Bowl. But nowadays, who gives a fuck? Like, whatever. If they're good, that's fucking amazing. I didn't expect anything last year. For them to make it to the divisional round, that was very fucking exciting. You know, today's a very special day. Do you know why?
I'm just looking at this sheet of paper, and 47 leads me to believe it's John Lynch and not Clarabelle.
That
so it's
is
John
correct.
Lynch's birthday?
It's John Lynch's birthday. The GM of the San Francisco 49ers.
Well, he's probably out there watching. Happy birthday, John.
Johnny, you're my boy, my dog, my road dog. Happy birthday to you. I don't know how old he is. Hell of a GM. One of the best white safeties of all time.
I think he could have just said safety there, even though white probably wasn't super relevant.
True. If you make it white, he's probably number one. But yeah,
one of the best white people of all time.
100%.
Who's their top white person?
In terms of
just in general, top 10 white people in the world.
Oh man, you got Eminem.
Eminem's up there.
Stone Cold.
Trump.
That's about it.
Probably wouldn't have Eric Roof on there.
No.
I mean, John Lynch has got to be pretty
John
close.
Lynch is in the top 10.
Yeah.
He's got to be in the top 10.
Yeah, you heard it here first. Top 10 white person in the U.S., John Lynch.
Right now. And happy birthday to you, my friend. You give me a lot of good memories. You're giving us a lot of good memories. Because one time I slapped the shit out of him in front of our English teacher.
Can we fucking discuss that for a
Yeah,
minute?
so we can, real quick.
All right,
before
so
we
not
wrap
even
things
just
up.
necessarily the story of it, just the ridiculousness of it.
It's absurd.
And I will give you some credit here. You at one point, and I still think you have elements of this, but when you were younger, you were such a charismatic guy that, and even your friends who would be quote-unquote equals, at times would do things just to kind of appeal to you. And this story kind of sums it up. Is we had an English teacher, great woman, very strong mentor,
Good teacher.
and good teacher too. And I'll let you tell a story because I think you're a little bit better at storytelling. But my whole point is, like, her take on it was absolutely absurd, and her reason it was absurd is because of your charismatic nature that led her to believe that.
This was one of the most ridiculous things that ever happened. And when this happened is when I knew I had this teacher in my back pocket and I could do anything
Yeah, in your
I fucking wanted
front
to.
pocket too, buddy.
100%. So basically, on this day, John Lynch had gotten released from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which was fucking devastating to me. That's what I woke up to on ESPN. It was a really bad day because he was my favorite player on my favorite team. I thought he would be on the Bucs forever, like Derek Brooks or Rondé Barber, and they fucking cut him. Gruden moved away from him, brought in Jermaine Phillips. So when I got to school, being known at least by my inner circle of friends as a huge John Lynch fan, Eamon, being the dickhead that he is, took it upon himself to really nag me and kind of turn the screws on me about John Lynch getting cut. So we're sitting in this teacher's room and he's fucking with me about it, and I was very emotional. I rarely would ever do anything like this, and I apologized to you recently about doing this because it's very out of my character and I don't like to be physical, but he pushed me to the edge to where I actually slapped him in the face pretty hard, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I remember definitely feeling that one, and like, usually if your buddies are just playing around with you, like punching you, you just kind of laugh it off. But like, my face like fucking stung, and I was genuinely mad. But then before I reacted, I was like, one, I'm not necessarily a guy who gets in a lot of physical altercations, and two is like, it's a friend and I'm at school. But had that been somebody else, like at a bar, like I probably would have punched them. And I'm not somebody who gets into fights.
100%. It was completely over the line. It was a real slap, and it was right in front of the teacher. And you would think, when you cross the line physically in school, I mean, we saw it with Lindsey Burke and Jake Kelkenberg.
Yeah, everyone saw it.
That was my fault, too, by the way. We can talk about that another time.
Jake Kelkenberg, a top white person? Top 10? Is he
top
on the
25.
outside? Okay, top 25. All right.
So, slapped the shit out of him, and it was completely uncalled for. It was completely wrong. It was totally against the rules. She saw it with her own two eyes, and somehow, some way, she reprimanded Eamon for making fun of John Lynch getting released instead of reprimanding me for putting my hands on him. It was one of the craziest things I've ever fucking seen.
This is a kind of a shitty parallel. It makes you think it's like sexual assault. Like if a guy rapes a woman and then the police are like, well, what were you wearing?
Right. What were you flirting with him?
Yeah.
Like, did you look sexy?
Did you make eye contact with him?
She was like, you know how much Cody loves John Lynch. You know you shouldn't do that or you're going to get slapped.
That was the point. That is why I was doing it, because he loved John Lynch. If I was making fun of him for Martin Gramatica getting cut, it probably wouldn't have stung.
I wouldn't have slapped you, that's for damn sure. And I would never do that again, for the record.
I would hope so.
A one-time mistake will never happen. And on that note, I just want to thank you personally for making the time to come over here to make this a very special 15th episode, the Vince Carter episode.
I thought it was the Mahomes.
The Mahomes episode.
Dude, we still got about 10 minutes. If you're trying to kick me out, that's
I'm not trying to kick you out. I'm thinking that you got to be somewhere. So
no.
Let's keep rocking for 10.
The kids' bedtime isn't leaving, or the beds aren't leaving. Like they go to bed when I say they go to bed.
What's it like, man?
What's
it like? Just being a dad who's just in control and just...
So, it's funny you say that. So, I know your fans out there have followed my life pretty closely.
Of course. They're going to know about this already.
So, I am a single dad. My ex-wife is not in the picture whatsoever. And here's the thing. People, are you bitter towards her? And the answer is no. I'm kind of indifferent.
Healthy.
And a lot of people who I date or talk to, like who are divorced or have such situations, it's always so messy with the ex. There's always fighting about who gets the kids what days and who does that. I don't have to fucking deal with that.
Nice.
I am the sole decision maker, and obviously I rely on my mom, sister, and dad to help out a lot, but like if we are deciding how much money to spend on the girls for their school clothes, I get to do it. Fighting about bedtime, I get to do it. I don't have to console with anyone. I don't have to have disagreements. I've had a couple of girlfriends since we've gotten divorced. Obviously I needed to plug that in there so they knew I'm not a lonely loser.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Yeah, and there was never any instances or me being nervous about them meeting my ex because she wasn't in the fucking picture. And that's one of the...
That is nice. I never thought about that angle of it.
That's the thing. So I've dated a couple people afterwards who are divorced and have kids, and there's always this tension of like, when you meet the ex-husband, what's it going to be like? Are you not going to get along? Is there going to be issues down the road? And like, they never have to fucking worry about that. And the one thing I always tell them is like, you're not here to be the replacement mom. If anything, you're just here to be the cool aunt. Because
nice approach.
I think sometimes people think like, oh, this is a single parent.
Like
they're looking for somebody to come in and help ease the load,
take over the mom role.
Which I wouldn't want to do that. Someone else's kids, like it's not. If they needed some guidance or like a mentor, happy to do that. But I'm not comfortable telling someone else's kids how they need to live their life. Even if I was given that permission, I just don't want to do it.
At what point I know you're involved with someone right now, but at what point of the talking to do you bring up, or do you have pictures of your kids like on your profiles and stuff? Like, at what point do you broach that subject? Because that's got to be like a bomb drop on some level, because you got to be feeling this pressure of like, well, I have to let them know. Is this going to change the trajectory of how this might go? Like,
so that's a great question, and I've handled it both ways. I haven't been on the dating apps in maybe a month at this point, and one of the realizations I had is I don't think an online profile represents me in my best light. I think there's people online who would not be impressed with me, but if they met me in a setting, would find me a little bit more endearing.
Sure.
And I'm sure there's millions of women who are in the same boat, so it's not an exclusive thing to me. But I think online dating is kind of skewed towards not being helpful to men. There's so many more men on there than women, and quite frankly, women are going to have a lot of pics.
And we like the pic. Like, yeah, having good pics as a guy, that's helpful. But that's not like having good pics as a chick. We're much more physically...
Your personality shines more. Are you a good person?
Right.
Are you caring? How do you make them feel? And it's hard to measure just looking at it. Where a guy, it's like, oh, she looks good in a bikini. I'm already smitten.
I'm ready to go.
So for a while, I would always be extremely upfront about it. And I realized, like, am I doing myself a disservice? Because when I'm getting people, they're definitely not going to have an issue about it because I already acknowledge it. But I was like, how many people are telling me no that probably would have been okay otherwise?
That don't know you yet. Because if they know you and like you some yet or already, then maybe that won't be not a deterrent, but it won't necessarily set them in a different route because they're already interested. Where if you're just telling them right out of the gate, then they might be like, well, I don't even want to take the time to get to know him because I feel like that's already pushing me away.
Exactly.
Like,
once you've kind of built some level of attraction, I think some of those issues are not as relevant. And here's the thing. I always thought like, oh, I need to be upfront and tell people right away. I've dated several girls or had matches or whatever, and they didn't tell me until like a third or fourth day that they even had kids. So I was like, wait, there's no law that says you have to do it.
Right.
And then I started thinking like my last couple girlfriends were like, I had met them out of the bar, had talking, hang out with them. Like I never brought up the kids thing until like after we'd spent some time together, and it wasn't as big of an issue. I always wondered if I went up to him in the first 5 minutes, like, here are pictures of my kids, do they run away? But once you've already established that rapport, it makes it a little bit easier. So once I kind of moved away and was like, you know what, I'm not going to bring it up until we get in conversation, see how that goes. I had gone on a couple dates, and this was probably May, June. Things had gone well, and never brought up my kids once, and it just came up later in conversation, and it was treated as if it was a non-issue. Now, maybe they felt differently about that and were kind of upset, but I just realized, like, there's no rule that says you have to own that up front. And the thing is, I wasn't necessarily looking to get married right away.
Right.
So it's like, I can go out and have fun. I have a lot of freedom. My mom lives a couple doors down, a couple streets over. So does my sister. So, like, if you're just looking to casually date in the beginning, you don't necessarily even have to bring up
being
it's not
necessarily a factor. It doesn't even have to be introduced. And you certainly don't want to seem like you're hiding something, which you aren't, but it's like, if you're just fucking around with somebody and seeing them very casually, it's like, why do they even really need to know?
Exactly. And it's like, And I've been in situations, and I'm sure you've been in situations where you're talking to somebody and they just tell you all this heavy shit so on, and it can be
Too
fucking
much.
suffocating. And then I just kind of realized like, some of this stuff just isn't really relevant. Now, you always run the risk of, hey, I've slept with this person, I've been with this person for a month, and now I'm dropping the bombshell that I have kids. Like, they'll never be able to trust me. But it was something I was always super paranoid about and insecure about. Like, I don't want people to know I have kids. I love my kids, but in the dating market, I didn't want people to know. And as I've gotten older, and a lot of my peers have had kids, a lot of my friends have had kids, a lot of the girls that I'm starting to date have kids, I realized it's not as big of a deal as when I was 24 years old, and it was very hard. It's like, you were the one with kids, none of your friends have kids.
Yeah, that's definitely, I mean, when you had your kid, it was very early on. Now it's definitely different, and I think that there's also a flip side to it too, because it can benefit you in the sense that you may look more responsible. You might look like maybe you have it more together on some level, the fact that you care for two other human beings and you provide for them and things like that. I think there might be a flip side to that too.
There is and there isn't. If I was looking to date some 25-year-old likes to party, probably not going to be as big of a deal.
Right.
Some of the women I have dated, and I keep saying this like I'm some huge player, which is just the furthest thing from the case.
We all know your reputation, buddy.
Furthest thing from the case, a lot of them will have dads who aren't necessarily the best, not very active, or only see their kids like once every couple of weeks. So when they've realized like, oh, you're a very hands-on father, I think that's extremely adorable and attractive. So it kind of depends on the situation.
That's what I mean. That could be a huge turn-on for them, and then that's not even including your physical gifts. And when they get to that point, then they're really hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah, I mean, and I've definitely heard women say, and one of my first girlfriend after I got divorced, it said, I wasn't sure how I felt about dating someone with kids, but one of the things that really drew me to is, one, you don't complain about your ex, you hold yourself accountable, which to me is like one of the most attractive things a person could be. I hate when someone talks about how brutal their ex is and how their ex ruined their life. Like, it takes two. Everyone's got their issues.
You gotta stop doing that.
Yeah. Well, we've all we've all been there
on the podcast.
But the other thing is, she just said like you're very hands on with your girls. Like I remember the one morning you were brushing your daughter's hair, which is ironic because I've maybe done that one time and she just happened to be there.
Nice.
I'm not saying it was set up that way,
right,
but it may
just
have
worked
been.
out. Yeah,
and she's
sure.
like, I just think that's really attractive, a guy caring about his daughter's lives. So here's the thing, man, and I'm sitting there saying like I'm some fucking expert. I just realized that there's somebody out there that you're going to be compatible with. It took me a long time. Like if a girl was attractive, I would just put up with so much bullshit because like, oh, it's a cool girl or it's an attractive girl, people are gonna see this, there's gonna be some validation, guys around the office are gonna think I'm awesome, and then you just get fucking worn out from them because you're not compatible. Once you kind of meet someone that makes some sense, it may sound a little Hallmark-esque, but like I do think it brings levels of happiness to you.
It definitely does. I can only hope that someday I'll find that somewhere, somehow.
Well, you might have found that woman who was driving by you. Like that could have been
a great way to
maybe that she
segue.
was just projecting. Like she was so fucking pissed that you could potentially be gay,
right?
And she was trying to see if you were repulsed.
How could you not be looking at me?
Yeah.
And looking at this kid? I don't know. I really do hope that one day I can find someone like that that's just super compatible.
I just thought about, and I'll like. You ever think she was repulsed because it was a fucking kid?
That did not occur to me, but that actually makes a lot of sense.
33-year-old man trying to fuck a 15-year-old.
See, you know what? And that's funny you bring that up because one of the things we were talking about at the fantasy draft was we were
fucking kids?
No, we weren't discussing that until my exploits, but we were looking around at the room and we were noticing like a lot of guys have a lot of gray hair, a lot of guys, they look fucking old, and it's like, holy shit, like, see, when I do something like that to somebody, I'm thinking, I'm doing it from the mindset that I'm still like a 19-year-old hooligan. Because that's how I feel, especially when I'm fucking hammered. I'm not thinking about the fact that I'm 33 fucking years old, grown man, supposedly. That is kind of creepy on some level, and that could have been the reason for her disgustedness.
She's still irrational.
I do think that it was because it was gay. Just the look in her eyes, it screamed homophobia to me. And I don't know. I could be wrong. Maybe it was the pedophile aspect, but God only knows.
Yeah, both are clearly violations in society. Can't be a homo and a pedophile.
Could have been both.
Yeah.
Homo, pedophile.
Well, hold on, though. We'll backtrack on this, and then I got to get going and picking up the kids. But when you talked about meeting someone compatible, are you somebody who thinks that that's just like all Hallmark BS and doesn't actually exist and is manufactured by Hollywood? Or do you genuinely feel there's somebody out there who aligns with you and be perfect for you?
It's hard for me, man, because I got to, in a real, very real way, I have not met someone that I really liked, like that I had that like feeling for in a very long time.
Are you putting yourself out there to get that, though? Is maybe the better question.
Trying on some level. I don't consider it a main priority, and this is going to sound fucking stupid too, but I don't know that I'm open to it in the sense that, like, I just value my freedom so much. It's like I almost do things to push people away.
Like self-sabotage?
Yeah, like I kind of like put up signs that just say like unavailable, like, I'm doing whatever the fuck I want. Like I'm not, you can't even, and then like I also think this is going to sound even more retarded, but it's like until Clarabelle dies, like who can possibly mean more to me than that cat? I can't even imagine a human being could even fill that role.
It's that binary. You have to have a cat or a girlfriend. You can't have both.
That's how I feel sometimes because she's just the one for me. And it just, again, it goes back to like when I think about the way I felt about Katie Tabor when I was in 7th grade. I haven't had that feeling in so long, man. And I meet people that I kind of like. I definitely meet people that I think are attractive, but it's just like I don't feel this thing where like it's like I really want to be with this person. It's always like a take it or leave it thing with me. Like it's like, oh, if it works out, that'd be awesome. I do like that person, but it's like I'm almost. We were talking about this before, like low expectations. Like I keep the bar so low as far as what the outcome could be that I might not necessarily be open enough to the possibility of it.
Yeah, you could be blocking it.
It's very possible.
I mean, I guess the other thing I would ask, too, is, like, is it, and I don't know the answer to this, maybe you can only know the answer is, maybe it's something you don't feel right away, but it evolves. Like, as you meet somebody and know a little bit more about them, meet their family, see sides of them, watch them in front of people, like, maybe you just start to get those feelings as time comes.
Yeah, I might be expecting too much of, like, a love at first sight thing that never happens, and that might not be realistic. And granted, as much as that stuff means a lot to me, like obviously I do hope that she has a big tits and a nice ass, of course. So that's always, you kind of think about that too. It's like, how many people am I disqualifying that might meet those checklists but might not have the things that I want, that I'm looking for right out of the gate? Because a lot of times, the first thing is the physical attraction. So it's like, if they don't necessarily tick all those boxes, but they are really fucking cool, their family's awesome, they're fun to be around, it's like I might not even make it to the point to find out about that if I'm being really shallow. And I don't know, I got a lot to work on.
No, I mean, I think sometimes you got to ask yourself, what am I willing to put up with?
Sure.
And I for the longest time, and I would talk to my therapist about this, I was like, well, the person has to meet all these boxes. It's like, well, what are you willing to put up with? What matters to you? And what is something that's nice, but you don't necessarily have? And I'm not here to patronize you because I don't fucking know. You know what you want better than what I know. So I don't know. It's just something to think about. Like, just because somebody is lacking in some area doesn't necessarily mean it's not a bad fit for you.
True. I also don't compromise at all. And that's a big
I've
problem
heard.
for me. That's a big problem for me because I don't make concessions. I kind of just, I'm doing things my way, and you have to acquiesce to that, or you can go. And that's always my open door policy that I have. And a lot of times people choose to walk through that door and leave. And, it is what it is. But I'm hoping someday. I'm pretty immature. I mean, we discussed the Target story. I got a long way to go. So
it happens when you least expect it. And
true.
When you're
I
desperately
hope so.
looking for it, which I don't think you are, is typically when it doesn't happen. When you're focused on your shit, maybe that's doing a podcast, maybe that's working on your career. Like, that's when stuff starts to come your way. You just got to be open to it. Which, who fucking knows? Like, we could be dead tomorrow. You have no idea what life's gonna bring. I would say just be open to shit.
I should open up more. I should be more willing to. Definitely,
you got nothing to
consider.
lose, right? I mean, if your freedom is something that you strongly need and strongly want, then maybe it's not for you. But at the same token, it could just be self-sabotage, and you're scared to find something out, and you just justify it. Oh, I like my freedom. I don't know the answer to that. I'm just speculating.
I think some of the influences around me, like watching how some of my good friends have changed by finding that person, scares me a lot.
But they could change and you not like it, but they could also be more happy.
It could be great
I don't
for them.
know. They
Exactly.
could be fucking miserable.
But it's such a priority for me to be a good friend and to be a fun guy that it's like I would hate to lose any characteristics of that. And that's always a big priority for me. And at some point I'm going to have to let that go because at the end of the day, people move on and things happen. So, but I don't know. It's a worry of mine. I have certain rules for myself. It's like I would never let myself do that. I would never let myself be that person that says I have to be home at this time because such and such is going to bitch me out if I don't. I just
No, it's
it's a
something
complicated thing.
It's something I struggle with for a while, and a lot of times, like, I would just keep the peace just to not have an argument. It's something that I worked on. I would say, as someone who is your friend, obviously you're a lot of fun to be around, and you're the life of the party, but I think your friends would rather see you happy in a situation than necessarily be the life of the party. And those things aren't mutually exclusive. You
No.
can be both, but, like, your happiness is more important than any amount of fun you could be at a party.
Some girl's gonna have to really be willing to put up with a lot of bullshit.
Well, we'll put some flyers out there.
We'll see.
And then
if there's any takers.
Yeah, when we can talk about it next week. This could be your social experiment for the next week. Just going up to random people and asking if they have a boyfriend, and if not, listen to my podcast.
That's my move right now. So I just, real quick before we wrap up, I want to say thanks to the Plains who did their thing last week. There's no update right now, but I appreciated you guys going to bat for Mike and going to bat for me because I was on an island last week. Major shout outs to Eamon for stepping up to the plate and doing this. I hope we can do this again soon. This was a lot of fun, bringing back a lot of good feelings, a lot of good memories. I think we got that just natural chemistry that you just can't teach. And
if you could, Napa would teach it, right?
100% in his bike shirt.
Actually, he was physics. That was a bad one.
Well, he was physics, but he did wear bicycle
Yeah,
shoes.
that's true. That cancels it out.
That was the most important thing. So, guys, episode 15 in the bag. If you enjoyed it, let us know. Obviously, we always say like the video, subscribe to the channel. Please leave a comment. Can't tell you how important that is. Let us know what you thought of the man himself stepping in, filling that role, and I think we should plan on meeting up again as soon as
Let's
possible.
fucking do it next week.
Let's do it.
All right.
As far as I'm concerned, this is the thing moving forward. So I hope you enjoyed it. I think it's a different energy, but I think it's a great energy. I think that the show changes based on who's sitting on this couch, whether it's just me, and whatever. I don't need to explain that. I think you guys can put the
I think
pieces
it's
together.
understood.
Yes, exactly. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you, Eamon, for doing this. And I guess we'll see you next week. We're just
See you
getting
next
started.
month. Month.
That's right. We're just getting started up in here. And happy birthday to Reens on September 30th. And happy birthday to John Lynch, more importantly. All right. That's it.
All right. It's been real.
Adios.
Oh, man, I gotta bounce though.